My name is Michelle, and I'm the current PGY2 Oncology Pharmacy resident at Monument Health in Rapid City, South Dakota. And today I'm going to talk to you all about a newly approved medication called Epkinly or Epkinly. This medication was recently granted accelerated FDA approval on May 19, 2023. This is a helpful addition as there is a poor prognosis in relapsed refractory non-Hodgkin lymphoma, so this adds another treatment option for those patients. And it was approved then for that relapsed or refractory diffuse large B-cell lymphoma that was not otherwise specified, including that B-cell lymphoma arising from indolent lymphoma and high-grade B-cell lymphoma in adults after 2 or more lines of systemic therapy right now. Data from the EPCOR NHL-1 trial helped lead to accelerated approval of Epkinly. This trial was an open-label, multi-center, single-arm trial. There was 148 patients assessed for efficacy with this current indication, and the main efficacy outcome was overall response rate. They ended up finding that the overall response rate was 61%, with 38% of patients achieving complete responses in this study. And there was a median follow-up of 9.8 months among responders, with an estimated median duration of response of 15.6 months. Epkinly is a bispecific T-cell engaging antibody that targets CD3 and CD20. There's a photo showing this to the left, so you can kind of see it in a visual way, but it binds to the CD3 receptor expressed on the surface of T cells and CD20 expressed on the surface of lymphoma cells or healthy B lineage cells, and it ends up activating T cells, leading to release of pro-inflammatory cytokines and eventually B cell lysis. Epkinly does come with some boxed warnings. The two that we're most worried about are cytokine release syndrome or CRS and immune effector cell-associated neurotoxicity syndrome or ICANS. Some symptoms of CRS are fever, hypotension, and hypoxia, and then the ICANS symptoms are really going to be neurotoxicity-like, so altered consciousness level, motor weakness, seizures, things like that. ICANS occurred in about 6% of patients in the clinical trial, and CRS occurred in about 51% of patients. So CRS was a little bit more common, but they were both severe reactions that were seen in the trials and some warnings that come with the drug. We are working on creating a policy for management of these reactions at Monument Health, so we will be able to reference that policy for additional information sometime in the near future. In the trial, those CRS events were kind of broken down between doses, so looking at the percentages of it, you can see that in this graph. Really, the biggest percentage of those you can see was day 15 at 61% risk for that, 61% of patients having that. And then the median time to the CRS onset after the first full dose really was about 21 hours overall, but there was a range of about 0 to 7 days. The CRS did resolve in about 98% of patients, so most patients it did resolve in, and the median duration of CRS events was about 2 days with a range of 1 to 27 days. Because of the risk of CRS and also ICANS, like we've mentioned, patients should be hospitalized for 24 hours after the cycle 1 day 15 dose of 48 milligrams or that first full dose. As you can see in this graph, it's high risk for CRS, so that is why we want to have them in the hospital with close monitoring for a while after they first get that full dose. So also at Monument Health, we won't really start treating patients until after they have received their first full dose of the Epkinly. And then this is just a slide showing the ICANS events. So about 9 out of 10 ICANS events that did occurred in cycle 1, so most patients had them during cycle 1 if they were going to have them. And then the median time to this onset after initiation of therapy was about 16.5 days, with a pretty wide range still of about 8 to 141 days. And then relative to the most recent administration, the median time to onset was about 3 days. And then the median duration of ICANS was about 4 days with a range of 0 to 8 days, and it did resolve in 90% of patients with supportive care. Some other warnings that it does carry are serious and fatal infections. So this was in about 15% of patients in the studies. They saw some opportunistic infections, sepsis, things like that. And then serious or severe cytopenias is another warning that we worry about a little bit. Because of the risk of infection, we do want to consider giving infection prophylaxis right away for these patients. So prophylaxis for that pneumocystis pneumonia should be provided before starting the dose, as well as initiation of herpes virus prophylaxis to prevent that herpes zoster reactivation. This is a slide showing the most common adverse effects and the most common laboratory abnormalities that are of grade 3 or 4. The most common adverse events, we talked about CRS, but other ones are fatigue, musculoskeletal pain, injection site reactions, fever, abdominal pain, nausea, diarrhea, things like that. And then the lab abnormalities were mostly along those cytopenias, for those being grades 3 or 4, as you can see. Epkinly is dosed in a step-up manner to help prevent that risk of CRS and ICANS reaction. Additionally, to help prevent that reaction risk, all patients do require pre-medication with dexamethasone, diphenhydramine, and acetaminophen before each dose in cycle 1. This pre-medication can be continued in cycles 2 and beyond if we would like to, but it really should especially be continued for patients who experience a grade 2 or 3 CRS reaction with a previous dose. The dosing schedule is shown here with how it is dosed. It starts off with on day 1 a 0.16 milligram dose, and then it goes up to 0.8 milligrams on day 8, and they end up getting their first full 48 milligram dose on day 15. Then it continues as shown. It is important to note that compliance is really important while taking this medication, because if they do miss a dose for too long, they'll need to re-dose in a new titration, and there is a different schedule that can be followed for restarting the epcoritamab after any dose delays that are more than 8 days since the last dose. There are no dose adjustments that exist for altered kidney function or hepatic impairment or obesity. However, the medication was not studied in patients with creatinine clearance less than 30 or hepatic impairment with moderate or severe impairment. So like mentioned, Epkinly does have a place in therapy right now, and it is somewhat promising, but there are still ongoing trials to determine the actual place in therapy, and it could potentially be used for a sooner than third-line treatment option. If you have any questions at all for me, my email is msestak@monument.health. Here are my references, and thank you for listening.